Jay Linesider here. I'm here at the Snook Club Studios, and today I wanted to talk to you about reading the mullet on the mullet run. In other words, how can you look at the mullet schools that you're looking at and determine whether there's snook there or there's not snook there. And I got a slideshow that's behind me that I'm going to go through some of the slides to help demonstrate the kinds of things that you want to look for when reading the mullet schools. Now, first of all, you're going to want to try to find the mullet, and that's something I'm going to cover also. Finding the mullet can be problematic, and you can use like a buddy system. Your friends can tell you where they've seen them, and you can try to go there. But you can also use birds and other things like that. You can also look for snook jumping out of the water, tarpon jumping out of the water, things like that. Those are always the best indicators of where you need to throw your bait and where you want to be fishing. But absent those, sometimes you're just going to see masses of mullet, and they're going to be behaving either normally and not being spooked at all, which is not a good sign if you're trying to catch some game fish, or they could just be jumping up in the air a little bit, and it's also not that great a sign. That's usually some smaller bait that's or smaller fish, smaller predators that can't quite swallow them, and the mullet aren't too scared of them. What you really want to do is you want to find those schools of mullet that are jumping out of the water, splashing, and trying to get away from something that's trying to kill them. That's what you want to look for, and you also want to listen. You want to listen for a pop. If you hear a pop, especially at night, you need to get over there and cast your bait or your lure in that area, because a lot of times they'll miss the bait, and they'll see your bait or your lure and try to get that, or there'll be a school of 5 or 10 snook down there, and that one pop, and it'll bring the attention of all the other ones. So those are the kinds of things you want to pay attention to during the mullet run. Now I'm going to move over to my slide presentation that I created, and I hope you enjoy my slide presentation and this little video I put together for you. Now this slide is called Poor Man's Drones, aka birds. Now you may not have a drone, and most people don't, but you really do if you think about it. Birds like pelicans and ospreys, they're always on the lookout for schools of mullet. And this time of year, the pelican is your best friend, so can the osprey be, and so can the blue heron. Blue heron will often sit on a point or a shallow spot where they can wait for the snook to scare the mullet up towards where they are. Sometimes they'll feed on their own, but you can best bet that if there's a blue heron sitting on a bank somewhere, it is because mullet are going to be probably passing by. So now, as far as what you want to look for in the birds, you obviously want to see diving birds, but if you see birds sitting on the water, they could have been feeding, especially pelicans. They could have been feeding. They could be waiting for the next flurry of action. So that is one good sign for you. Now this next slide is more about how to read the mullet. What you want to see is an explosion like this here. You want to see mullet jumping in all different directions, and you want to see some kind of center activity where the game fish, particularly the snook or the tarpon, is coming up from underneath and the mullet are shooting out. That is what you want to see. You want to see, and I have this going up, this arrow, because you want to see the mullet jumping out of the water, just kind of like this rocket is taking off. You want to see them taking off and jumping up, because they're going to be spooked from underneath. That's what the snook like to do. They feed from underneath. That's what the tarpon do, although sometimes they'll get on their side. Sometimes they'll come at them sideways, if you've ever seen some drone footage like that. But that's just a mechanism of their jaw, I believe, and that's why they like to feed on their side for the schools of mullet. Of course, obviously, if you see jumping tarpon, you see jumping snook out of the water, that is the ultimate, the penultimate. That's where you want to get to. But if you haven't seen that yet and you're trying to determine whether the baits you see that are nervous or jumping or whatever are going to be holding the snook, this is the kind of action you want to see, a jumping out of the water. Not just nervous mullet, not just flicking mullet. You want to see mullet jumping clear out of the water, running for their lives, and trying to avoid predators such as tarpon, snook, jacks, and sharks. All right, this next slide is exactly what I was just talking about. It's the nirvana. You want to see these bodies flying out of the water. And here I got the Snook Club logo, snook jumping up for them. That's the kind of thing you want to see. You want to see those mullet clearing the water, trying to get away from something attacking them underneath. You don't want to just see some half-hearted flicks or jumps or anything like that. You want to see something really busting up those schools. And when you see that, you want to get over there as soon as possible. There's another thing, you got to use all your senses when you're fishing. And sometimes, especially at night, there'll be a popping sound, and snook make a distinct popping sound at night. And if you hear that, you need to determine where that's coming from. And you need to get over there as fast as possible and cast over there as fast as possible, because it's likely to happen again. May not be, but every couple of minutes, but you need to get your bait, your lure, whatever you're doing, and get it over to that location. I'm going to try now to replicate the sound with cupping my hands. Let's see how I do. That was it, that last one. That's the kind of sound you want to hear. You hear that from a long ways away if it's a good large snook popping. You can also hear that during the daytime. Sometimes jacks will make a similar sound. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference, but whether it's jacks or snooks, you want to get your bait over there as soon as possible, because you never know. The snook could be mixed in with the jack. The jack could be the aggressive ones making the mullet go crazy, but the snook could be just sitting there waiting for the mullet to make that fatal mistake and swim towards them. The snook and the jacks obviously work together sometimes, and the snook aren't as fast on as far as chasing the bait, and we'll get to that in a second. But they could be there lying in ambush in a spot known to hold jack or known to hold mullet, such as like a seawall or a bridge, something like that. All right, in this next slide, what I'm trying to demonstrate is when you would see some jacks. And you're trying to determine whether whatever you're seeing is jacks feeding or is it snook feeding. If you see pop number one over here, even if it looks like an explosion, like with mullet running every direction, like I mentioned before, and then 10 seconds later, they're 30, 40, 50 feet over here doing the same thing. And then 20 seconds later, they're over here doing the same thing. And then they're over here doing the same thing. That's jacks or bluefish or some kind of other fish. That's not snook. Snook do not pop from here to here to here to here. If it's rapid movement along a line of a school of mullet, that's most likely jack. Again, I'm not saying don't cast over there, but if you're trying to figure out, whether you should chase a school of fast-moving fish, that's not going to be your snook. The snook might be in the spot number 4, waiting for this jacks to scare the mullet over to you. You never know. So you got to kind of be, you got to play your odds, but don't be chasing jacks all day long and hoping to hook up on snook. Keep looking if you see something like this, especially if you have other options. If you don't have any other options, maybe stick around those and hope for your snook or whatever, or your tarpon. But if you see this rapid movement popping here, and then 10 seconds later over there, 15 seconds later over here, that's going to be your fast-moving fish such as jack or ladyfish. Definitely not tarpon either. All right, in this next slide, what I'm trying to demonstrate is if you see rapid long jumps in a row, that's probably bluefish or jacks. In other words, if they're going out of the water, jumping here, then jumping here, then jumping there, and they're going in a straight line, that's a fast-moving fish. That's not going to be your snook. But again, you probably may want to cast over there. Maybe there is a snook, especially if they're chasing them into a mangrove situation or they're chasing them into a seawall situation. You know, that last little leap that mullet makes, maybe right where the snook are. I've seen it a lot of times where, you know, the jack will start here and jump, and then they'll end up over here by the mangroves, and then the snook, of course, would be closer to the mangroves, waiting for those mullet to be tired from jumping all those times, and also they can be protected from dolphin and sharks and other things like that by being close to the mangroves. So if you see these rapid long jumps, you know, don't go chasing those down and wasting a lot of time thinking you're going to get, you know, a snook out of that, unless, like I said, they're chasing them to a spot where the snook may be lying in ambush. You may want to be at that last spot where that last jump is, right up along those mangroves. If you see that happening over and over again all day long, that may be the thing to do. That may be your key to getting your big snook, is just waiting there along the edge of the mangroves where those jack have been pushing up the schools of mullet. Now this last slide is the biggest danger, and that's when you see mullet just doing half-hearted jumps. They're flicking their tail. They're not coming all the way out of the water. They're being chased, but they're being chased by smaller fish such as maybe little trout, little ladyfish, littler jacks, stuff, maybe even catfish. Gap-tail catfish are known to try to harass the schools of mullet, and I've caught some of those, unfortunately, thinking that there was going to be a good fish there. But usually these small flicks and jumps where they don't clear the water, that's not going to be good fish there. You're going to be wasting your time, most likely. I mean, there's exceptions to all these rules, but most likely that's not what you want. You want to keep moving. You want to keep looking. You want to look for an ambush point where the jacks or the snook are jumping and splashing and popping. Now, some of the spots to look for are around bridges, and of course, points, corners on seawalls, intersections of canals, things like that, where canals dump out into the intercoastal. You know, the jacks or the snook and the tarpon, they could be right around on the corners waiting for that school to come from the north, and they'll be lying in the canal ready to shoot out into the intercoastal and grab the mullet coming by. Or they could just be slamming them against the wall in the intercoastal, or they could be slamming them against the wall in the canal. A lot of times the ends of canals are good places to look. And obviously the beach is a good place to look. If you're fishing the beach, a lot of these rules don't apply. You're gonna be seeing, you know, snook and tarpon and sharks, this cartwheeling right through those schools of bait, and that's where you obviously want to be. And as far as that's concerned, you know, you may want to have some buddies all go, you know, try a different beach, and then wherever the bait happens to be the thickest, wherever there's the most activity, that's where you all should, you know, call each other and text each other and say, hey, they're really biting over at XYZ beach. You know, I'm really into them. Or you may not be the one that finds them, and your buddy does, and hopefully he'll text you and say, hey, they're really jumping over here, and let you know, you got to go 2 miles north, you got to go 2 miles south, something like that. That's basically how it's done on the beach. They have like a little coconut telegraph system going on, and everybody tells everybody where the hot bite is or was the day before, and you know, they hope it reoccurs in the same spots you know, the next day. But you definitely got to try to find them, because we're in the mullet run right now, but it's not a full run yet. And you know, one day might be great, and the next day might be terrible. So you might have to work at it. You might have to cover some ground to find these fish. But you know, your best bet is to find some diving birds, and you can see those from a long ways away, especially early in the morning. But once the sun gets up, you might be able to see the pods. If the sun is, you know, bright, you can see the dark spots. You can see them moving from a long ways away, and you can see the fish busting them. So that's the way to do it on the beach. Now, another thing you got to be aware of is when a bird, like this is your bird, flies this way, he's going to be casting the shadow down to the water, and this is going to be a shadow right here. And then the shadows are going to be moving along the direction of the bird, obviously. And you may see mullet jump or freak out and think something's going on, but that's just the bird that just flew over. And they'll have a distinct different kind of jumping. It'll be this whole, if there's a whole line of mullet around here, when this shadow line goes across all these fish that we're saying are right here, they'll start flicking here, and it'll be kind of like a wave of rain just going across the top of the water a lot of times. And just make sure you look up, make sure that wasn't caused by a bird, because that's not going to get you anywhere fishing under a bunch of mullet spooked by a bird. Another thing that I've noticed a lot is when a wake comes in from like the intercoastal, and a wave will come running along to the school of mullet, and for some reason, if it's calm and that's the only wake there is from that boat, all the mullet will start getting nervous and jumping out of the water. They think something's coming, they feel that pulse, and you know, it's not a predator. That is a good way to find where the schools of mullet, if you're having trouble, is by looking for those boat wakes. And also, this is another great way, you know, going back to the drone situation. If you're having trouble finding the bait, look at the shadow from the birds, and or the birds, if they're flying low over the water, you can guarantee that this shadow goes over a bunch of mullet. They're going to jump. So if you don't see a jump, that means there's nothing there. If you do see them jump, you know there's some mullet there. So if you don't have any mullet to go on, you know you're going to see something happen when the shadow goes by. Same with the boat wake, same with the birds when they're flying low. The pelicans, I think, on purpose, will fly low and see if they're spooking anything. And if they do spook something, they note it, and they'll either come back, circle back, and come and try to catch those mullets or baits or whatever they are, and or they'll note that and, you know, come back later. Maybe they're looking for something better. They'll keep moving, but they know when they fly low on the water that there should be something spooking if there's a bait there. So they're searching too. So use all your tools. Use your eyes, your ears, and even your sense of smell. You know, if there's a bunch of fish getting killed, you can kind of smell it, and you can see the oil on the water, and you know something happened there. Maybe not, you know, in the last 10 minutes or so, but it might have been 10 minutes before you got there. But if you see a lot of oil on the water and smell, you know, fish smell, you know, that's another thing to keep in mind. Use all your senses. Use your eyes, your ears, and your sense of smell. And also use your voice. Call your buddies. See where the fish are. All right. I hope you enjoyed these tips on how to read the schools of mullet. It is, you know, I guess subject to, you know, different interpretation. Some people may not agree with what I said. Some people might, you know, your experience may differ. But I'm just trying to give you the benefit of my knowledge from what I've learned throughout the years. And hopefully you can use that and cash in and on some slots, which is my next slide here. Let's see here. Can I do it? All right. This is a slat snook I got last year on the paddleboard. I believe I released him, but as you can see, he's 28 inches. That's what you guys want. That's what you're after. You're after that slot size, maybe a little bigger than that one, a little fatter, but you know, that's the goal. And I hope some of these things I've mentioned help you reach your goals, whatever they may be. Tarpon, snook, jacks, maybe even sharks, maybe after them. But it's a game. It's a fun game to play. Mullet run goes for a long time. Some years ago to the end of November. It depends on how fast and how thick they're coming through, and you know, it's always a good time. And if you lure fishermen, you don't always need to, you know, have a live mullet on there. Some of the best fishing is when you find a bridge and or a jetty, and there used to be a lot of mullet there the day before, and the snook are still going to be there waiting for that next school, and they're hungry. You throw your lure out there, and they're so hungry they're going to bite it because they think, you know, hey, I'm hungry. I was sat here all day, nothing came by, and now I'm ready to eat. So think about that next time you're lure fishing. You can have a hot spot one day. Snook will still be there, still be hungry. They're not going to wait too long. They're not going to be there too many days if nothing comes by, but it is a good way to get a nice bite. And because sometimes throwing into these schools of mullet that you're getting blasted, even with live bait. I was on the beach the other day. I saw about 50 snook jump up in the air. There was about 20 fishermen. Not one of them got a bite. So, you know, your odds are kind of low sometimes with all these millions of mullet coming through. But you just got to be patient, play the game, and try to make your bait look a little different than the rest of them. And maybe weight it down, throw it to the outside of the school. Those are all things that may help you get the bite when there's millions of mullet to choose from. All right, tight lines. Take care.